The ocean was dark, its surface a cold expanse of black glass, the moonlight barely penetrating the endless depths below. The old ship creaked as it swayed gently with the waves, anchored far from any known shore. There, far off the coast of an isolated European village, a team of divers prepared for a journey into the abyss. They were the last ones to arrive, some seeking adventure, others a way to escape their own demons. But none of them could have known what awaited them at the bottom of the sea. Among them was Elena, an experienced diver whose reputation in the underwater exploration world was unmatched. Her pale skin, pale blue eyes, and icy demeanor belied the storm of emotions within her. She had accepted this mission with the weight of an unspoken promise on her shoulders, one that had cost her everything. The others, Lucas, the brash, cocky archaeologist, Jonas, a quiet and brooding marine biologist, and Clara, the superstitious historian, were all equally committed, driven by the lure of discovery. They had come together for a single purpose: to find the sunken city of Valnara, a forgotten civilization that had vanished beneath the waves more than 1,000 years ago. Legend had it that it wasn't just any city. Some said it was home to a temple that held a treasure beyond imagination, an artifact capable of changing the world. But the local fishermen spoke of something far darker, that the city was cursed, that the waters around it were haunted by spirits seeking revenge on any who dared disturb their domain. The sunken city was more than a mere myth. It had been found before in scraps and half-remembered stories. However, it had always been elusive. No ship, no sonar, no search team had ever brought back conclusive evidence. Until now. Elena's heart raced as the dive master signaled for them to begin. The air was thick with tension, each diver preparing to descend into a world they could not fully comprehend. One by one, they slipped into the abyss, descending deeper into the water until the world above vanished entirely, swallowed by the crushing silence. The ocean, once peaceful, now felt alive with something ancient and hungry. The further they went, the darker it became, the pressure building around them. Elena glanced at her watch, the glow from her diving lamp flickering as it illuminated the impenetrable blackness below. She could hear nothing but the slow, rhythmic sound of her own breath and the occasional distant creak of the ship above. Then at last something changed. The seafloor appeared, smooth and untouched, as though time had not dared to touch it. There were no marks, no coral growths, just flat stone, unsettlingly smooth and perfectly even. And then, as if emerging from a dream, a massive shape loomed before them. At first, Elena thought it was a trick of the light, but as the beam of her light flicked across the surface, her heart stopped. The structure was impossibly large, towering against the ocean floor like a petrified giant. A temple. It had been submerged for centuries, but its stone walls were still intact, untouched by erosion. The water around it was unnaturally still, an eerie calm hanging in the thick, cold current. There were no fish, no movement, just silence. Lucas signaled to Elena, his fingers dancing in the cold water as he motioned toward the temple. They made their way to the steps leading to the entrance. As they approached, a strange pressure seemed to envelop them, making the water feel thick, almost suffocating. The hairs on the back of Elena's neck stood on end. Something wasn't right. The legends hadn't lied. The city was cursed. She could feel it in her bones, the weight of centuries of forgotten history pressing in on her. The entrance to the temple was framed by two colossal stone statues of forgotten gods, their faces obscured by algae and barnacles. Strange markings covered the walls, inscriptions that no one on the team could decipher. But one thing was clear: something was waiting inside. Elena hesitated, then led the way inside. The temple's interior was like a tomb, and as they moved deeper into its heart, the temperature of the water seemed to drop even further. The dark stone walls shimmered with an unnatural sheen, as if coated in something slick and oily. The feeling of being watched grew stronger with every step. And then they found it. At the heart of the temple, resting upon an altar, was a stone pedestal. Upon it lay the object they had come for. A gemstone glowing faintly, casting an eerie blue light across the chamber. The gem seemed to pulse, sending ripples through the water as if alive. It was beautiful yet terrifying. Elena felt a strange compulsion to reach for it, as if it had already chosen her. Before she could move, a sound echoed through the water, a low guttural growl that seemed to come from all directions at once. The very air around them seemed to twist, the water stirring with unseen forces. From the darkness of the temple's corners, shapes began to emerge. Shadowy figures, twisted and contorted, their eyes glowing with an unearthly light. Creatures of the deep, guardians of the gem. Lucas gasped in horror, his flashlight flickering as his hand trembled. "We need to get out. Now." But it was too late. The temple had awoken, and the sea was no longer a silent, passive observer. It was alive, and it would not let them leave. As Elena reached out for the gemstone, the light from it intensified, blinding them all in its brilliance. The creatures lunged. The water turned red with the light of something ancient, something not meant to be disturbed. And as the darkness closed in around them, Elena realized the truth. The city, the gem, the temple were only a doorway. A doorway to a world far beyond their comprehension, one where humanity's fate would be rewritten forever. But first they had to survive the depths. The sea was a cold, suffocating embrace, its dark depths swallowing every trace of light. Elena's heart pounded as the chaos of the temple unfolded around her. The eerie blue light from the gemstone still hung in the water like an otherworldly beacon, casting an unnatural glow on the twisted, distorted shapes that now surrounded them. Her breath caught in her throat, and her gloved hands gripped the side of the pedestal as she tried to steady herself. Lucas was the first to react, his movements frantic as he scrambled to reach the entrance. "We have to get out of here now," he screamed, his voice barely audible over the sound of rushing water and the groaning of the temple's ancient walls. The shadows in the corners of the chamber began to writhe, undulating like serpents waiting to strike. But Elena couldn't move. Her eyes were locked on the gemstone, its glow intensifying with every passing second. It pulsed like a beating heart, beckoning her. It was as if it knew her, calling to her from the depths of the ocean, whispering promises of power, of salvation. She felt the pull, a magnetic force, a command that she could not deny. For a moment, her mind went blank, and she was no longer aware of the growing darkness around her. "Elena." Jonas's voice snapped her back to reality. He was at her side, his eyes wide with terror. "What are you doing? We need to leave or we're going to." Before he could finish, the water around them seemed to shift. The creatures, the dark figures emerging from the shadows, began to move closer. Their forms were no longer human, tall, gaunt shapes, their eyes glowing a sickly yellow. Their limbs were elongated and twisting, their features obscured by darkness, but their presence was undeniable. They were not mere guardians. They were something worse. Elena's pulse quickened as one of the figures lunged forward, its arms stretching impossibly long, reaching for her. She barely had time to react, the cold, clammy fingers brushing against her arm as she pulled away. A low hiss filled the water, a sound so filled with malice that it sent a chill through her spine. "We're not alone," Elena whispered, her voice a mix of awe and horror. "They've been waiting for us." Jonas backed away, his eyes darting around the temple. This is a trap. The city wasn't meant to be found. We've disturbed something ancient." Lucas was already halfway to the entrance, his breathing erratic. "Screw this. I'm getting out of here." But the moment he turned, the water shifted again, and something far worse than the guardians emerged. From the depths of the temple, a massive figure rose, its form blocking the entrance. The shadow seemed to take shape, a towering presence so immense that it dwarfed everything around it. It was neither human nor animal, but a grotesque amalgamation of both, its body covered in scales that shimmered in the blue light, and its eyes like the gemstone itself, glowed with an otherworldly fire. Elena's breath caught in her throat as she realized what it was. The guardian of the temple, the entity that had protected the gem for millennia. And it was awake. The figure extended one long bony arm, the water around it swirling with a powerful force. It didn't move quickly, but its presence alone seemed to freeze the space around them. The stone walls of the temple groaned as if the very foundation of the place were shaking. Jonas tugged at Elena's arm, his grip tight. "Elena, we have to leave. It's too late for the gemstone. We can't outrun that thing." But Elena was rooted to the spot. She could feel the gem calling to her, its pulse resonating with the deep, ancient power inside her. It was as if the temple and the creature recognized her, knew her purpose. In a fit of desperation, Clara, the historian, swam toward the massive figure, her voice trembling as she shouted, "We must return the gem. We can't take it back to the surface." But the creature, if it even heard her, showed no sign of mercy. Its hollow eyes locked onto Clara, and a bone-chilling wail echoed through the temple, reverberating in the water like a scream from the very depths of the earth. Elena finally moved, her mind no longer her own. She reached for the gemstone, her fingers grazing its smooth surface. The moment her skin made contact with it, a jolt of energy shot through her, as if her entire body had been struck by lightning. She gasped, the vision flashing in her mind. The world around her blurred and she saw the future. She saw humanity's fall, cities crumbling, forests burning, oceans swallowing the land. She saw faces, their eyes empty, their bodies twisted in agony. The war, the suffering, the despair. But amid the chaos she saw the portal, an opening, a way out. It wasn't just a treasure. It was a key. As the vision faded, she snapped back to reality, her breath shallow and ragged. The gemstone in her hand pulsed once more, and she could feel the weight of the decision before her. She had to make a choice. The creature was closing in, its massive form looming over them, and the guardians were still lurking in the shadows. "We need to leave," Elena said, her voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. "But we can't just take the gem back with us. It's not a treasure. It's a key to something else." Jonas stared at her, his eyes filled with confusion. "What are you talking about?" Before she could explain, the temple trembled again. The walls cracked and debris fell from above, swirling around them in a violent current. The guardians shrieked as the ancient being raised its arm, ready to strike. "We don't have time," Elena shouted. "Grab the gem and swim to the surface, now." But as they turned to flee, the creature lunged forward, its massive hands swiping through the water with terrifying speed. The impact sent a shockwave through the temple, and the entire structure began to collapse, the stone walls crumbling around them. The force of the explosion sent Elena spiraling into the darkness, her body tossed like a rag doll. She fought to regain control, to find her bearings, but the water was growing murkier by the second, filled with the wreckage of the temple's destruction. Then out of the chaos she heard it. A voice, deep and resonant, not in her ears but in her mind. "You have awakened us. Now you must take the key." The last thing Elena saw before the water swallowed her whole was the glowing blue light of the gemstone, flickering as if alive, its power calling her into the unknown. The temple had collapsed around them, the sea churning with violent force as if the ocean itself sought to bury its secrets deep within its depths once more. Elena fought against the current, her heart hammering in her chest, her breaths shallow through the regulator. The world was a blur of blackness, broken only by the faint glow of the gemstone clutched tightly in her gloved hand. The water had turned cold, unnaturally so, and it was suffocating. A strange, palpable weight pressed against her chest, making every movement feel sluggish, every breath feel like it might be her last. But she couldn't stop. She couldn't. The gemstone, the key, was in her possession now. And it had chosen her. A sharp pain lanced through her head as she tried to orient herself in the crushing darkness. Her mind swam with the vision she'd glimpsed, an ocean of destruction, an endless war, souls crying out in torment. She could hear them even now, faint whispers carried by the water. The ancient being's voice still echoed in her mind, its deep, resonating command urging her to fulfill her purpose. "Take the key." The words gnawed at her, pushing her forward through the chaos, as if some unseen hand was pulling her towards a destination she could not see. Her dive light flickered and sputtered, casting ghostly shadows across the ruins that had once been the temple. The stone columns that had supported the sacred hall now lay in ruins, the sea slowly reclaiming its territory. In the distance, the other divers, Lucas, Jonas, Clara, were just silhouettes against the falling debris. They were trying to regroup, but the weight of the ocean was closing in on them. "Elena." Lucas's voice rang through the water, faint but urgent. He was struggling against the current, his limbs slow as if the water itself was fighting him. Elena glanced around and saw him, his form growing hazy as he reached out, but the distance between them seemed impossible. The pressure was too great, too disorienting. She could feel the world pressing in, a suffocating grip that refused to let go. Yet, her hand instinctively tightened around the gemstone. She could feel its power, pulsing with life, beating like a heart, urging her to move forward. "Elena, please?" Lucas shouted again, his voice more frantic this time, breaking through the fog in her mind. But she didn't respond. She couldn't. The gemstone had locked her in a trance-like state, drawing her deeper into the heart of the ocean. Her vision blurred, her thoughts fractured, and for a moment she felt herself slipping into the depths of a nightmare. And then it came, a deep, guttural growl. The sound reverberated in the water, so powerful that Elena felt it in her bones. It was the creature, the one that had guarded the temple. It had followed them, its enormous form slinking through the dark waters like a shadow. It was too close now, and Elena could feel the pressure of its presence, like a dark cloud looming over her. The water began to swirl violently around her, and the temperature plummeted, the cold creeping into her bones like ice. From the depths of the ocean, a pair of glowing eyes emerged, first faint, then burning with an unnatural light. The creature was real. It was hunting them. Lucas's cries were drowned out as Elena's mind split into two. One part of her screamed to swim to the surface, to escape the looming darkness, while another part, the part that was now one with the gemstone, whispered a different message. The key must be used. You must open the door. The pressure of the water was unbearable now, but it wasn't just physical, it was emotional too. Every breath felt like a battle. Her heart thudded loudly in her ears. The growling grew louder. The shadows behind her shifted, swirling. The creature was closing in, its limbs massive and unnatural, reaching for her. Elena. Jonas's voice pierced the terror, but it was too far away. Something inside Elena snapped. She couldn't outrun it. They couldn't escape. They were all going to die here at the bottom of the sea, swallowed by the ocean's ancient wrath. But the gemstone, its light burned brighter now, its power pulsing in rhythm with her heart. Open the door, it commanded again. She had no choice. Her fingers curled around the gemstone, her body moving with a mind of its own as she held it up into the water. The light began to pulse with such intensity that it illuminated the dark abyss, casting an eerie glow over the ruins. The shadows around her recoiled as if afraid. The ocean itself seemed to hold its breath. And then it happened. A rip in the fabric of reality. The water around Elena shimmered, distorting in ways that defied all logic. A tear in the fabric of space itself opened before her, its edges flickering like a storm on the horizon. The air, or what passed for air under the water, seemed to vibrate with an energy too intense to comprehend. Elena gasped, her chest tightening with the power that surged through her. The creature howled as if it had been struck, its growl transforming into something more primal, more tortured. The walls of the ruined temple cracked, and the sea began to churn with such fury that Elena was almost swept away by the waves. The tear in the water grew, swirling around her like a vortex, pulling at her, pulling at the others. They had no choice but to follow. But Elena, despite the terror swirling around her, could see it, through the portal. A new world. The sea darkened, and for a brief moment, the waters parted. Through the rift, Elena saw what the gemstone had promised. A world that was not the earth she knew but something else. The air was clear, untouched by war or devastation. The sky was golden, and fields stretched as far as the eye could see, untouched by time. People, dressed in white robes, walked peacefully, their faces serene, their bodies free from the sickness of conflict and suffering. It was a paradise. But the creature was no fool. It roared again, a deafening sound that tore at Elena's mind. The guardians, creatures of the deep, their eyes glowing with hatred, surrounded her, their presence suffocating. She could hear them whispering in a language older than time, their voices like the crashing of waves against stone. They had been the gatekeepers of this world, and now that the rift had opened, they would do everything in their power to keep it from being breached. Elena had one choice: to close the rift and let the ocean reclaim its secrets, or to step into the unknown, into a world that might hold the answers, but could also bring the end of humanity as she knew it. The gemstone pulsed once more, its glow flickering like a heartbeat. And Elena, filled with a courage she had never known, made her decision. Elena stood at the edge of the rift, the glowing gemstone now embedded in her hand, its light pulsating with a rhythm that matched her own frantic heartbeat. The world on the other side of the tear was everything the gemstone had promised. Peace, untouched by the chaos and suffering that had plagued humanity for centuries. It was a vision of serenity, a paradise that seemed too perfect to be real. But the horrors she had just witnessed, the creature, the guardians, told her that this world was not without its price. The growls of the creature were growing louder, vibrating through the water, reverberating in her chest like the drumbeats of a coming storm. The rift, her only hope for escape, was being pulled at from both sides. Elena could feel the tug of the ocean's depths, its cold fingers wrapping around her legs, trying to drag her back into the crushing darkness. But the world beyond the rift beckoned her forward, a light that seemed to pierce through the suffocating gloom of the ocean. Lucas's voice broke through her thoughts, panicked and strained. "Elena, don't." But she was already moving. It was as if something inside her had made the decision for her. The gem was no longer merely a treasure. It was a key, and it had unlocked something inside her, a door that she could not close. The power it held was beyond her comprehension, but it was undeniable. She could feel it coursing through her, filling her veins with a cold fire, urging her to step through the rift. "Elena." Lucas's voice was desperate now, the sound of his fins slapping against the current growing louder as he swam toward her, but Elena did not look back. The creature's growls were now mixed with the howls of the guardians. They were closing in on her, a mass of writhing shapes in the water, their glowing eyes fixed on her. The shadows twisted and contorted, some of them fading into the darkness, while others approached with malicious intent. But Elena felt no fear. Not anymore. The gemstone in her hand was a beacon, and she was the one it had chosen. She could feel the power thrumming beneath her skin. With a final glance over her shoulder, Elena saw Lucas and Jonas, both of them fighting against the powerful current, their faces pale with fear. She could see the terror in their eyes, the confusion. They didn't understand. They didn't know what she knew. "I'm sorry," she whispered to them, though her voice was lost in the suffocating water. And then she stepped through. The moment she crossed the threshold, the pressure of the ocean lifted. The water, once cold and suffocating, was replaced by warm air that filled her lungs. Elena gasped, her body shuddering with the sudden change. She was no longer underwater, but standing in a vast, open field under a sky painted with soft hues of gold and pink. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, gentle shadows across the lush grass. The land stretched endlessly before her, a tapestry of rolling hills, untouched forests, and crystal-clear rivers that glittered like silver threads weaving through the landscape. She felt a sense of peace here, a tranquility that she had never known. The air smelled of wildflowers and fresh earth, and the gentle breeze carried with it the scent of something ancient and pure. It was as if time itself had been forgotten in this place. Nothing about it felt real. Nothing about it felt like home, but it was more peaceful than anything she had ever known. Elena looked down at the gemstone in her hand. It was still glowing, but its light had softened, as if it had found its purpose. It no longer pulsed with the frantic urgency it had earlier. Now it felt content, as if it had been waiting for her to arrive. Behind her, the rift shimmered, the faint glow still visible in the distance. Elena felt the weight of the choice she had made pressing down on her. She had crossed the threshold, and she knew there was no going back. The landscape before her seemed to hum with life. She could see figures in the distance, their forms elegant and serene, walking across the meadows with a grace that defied the heaviness of the world she had left behind. They were dressed in simple, flowing robes, their faces calm and peaceful. They didn't look at her with fear or curiosity, only with understanding, as if they had been waiting for her arrival. One of them, a woman with silver hair and a presence that radiated tranquility, approached Elena, her footsteps light on the grass. Her eyes were kind, but there was a depth to them that suggested wisdom beyond time. "You have come," the woman said, her voice gentle but filled with an ancient weight. Elena swallowed hard. Her mind was racing, her heart pounding in her chest. "Where am I?" "This is the land beyond the rift. A world untouched by the wars and pain of the one you left behind. A place for those who are chosen. A place where the suffering of your world cannot reach." The woman's words were calm, soothing, but Elena could feel the underlying tension in the air. There was something about this place, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. The harmony was unsettling, like a song played on a broken instrument, beautiful yet haunting. "Why have you brought me here?" Elena asked, her voice shaking despite the calm of the surroundings. "What is this place?" The woman smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You have brought the key, the gemstone. The key that opens the door to our world, but also the key that keeps your world from crumbling. The balance has been disturbed, Elena. Your world is on the brink of destruction, and only the key can save it. But you must decide. Will you keep the key or will you return?" The words hit Elena like a punch to the gut. The weight of the decision pressed down on her like 1,000 tons of stone. She had crossed the threshold, but now she was faced with an impossible choice. She had seen the world she came from, war, suffering, disease, and she had witnessed the power of the gemstone. She had felt its pull, its promise of peace. But could she leave behind her world? Could she abandon her friends, her family, and the life she had known for the sake of an unknown future? "The key is a bridge between worlds," the woman continued, her voice softening. "But the bridge is fragile. Choose wisely, for once you make your decision, there is no turning back." Elena stood frozen, the weight of the decision settling over her like a storm cloud ready to burst. Behind her, the rift shimmered in the distance, a reminder of the world she had left behind, and the one that awaited her. With the gemstone in her hand, she was the keeper of the key. The fate of both worlds rested on her shoulders. The only question was, which world would she choose? The silence that hung in the air was profound, like a heavy curtain between Elena and the impossible decision that loomed before her. She stood in the field, surrounded by the peaceful hum of the land beyond the rift. The sun was now lower, casting an almost ethereal glow across the meadow, and the soft rustling of the grass seemed to whisper ancient secrets. The figures that surrounded her walked with purpose, moving in synchronized harmony, their eyes never straying from their peaceful task. They were not bothered by her presence, nor did they seem to question it. But Elena could feel the weight of her own heartbeat in the pit of her stomach. The rift, a tear between worlds, still glowed faintly in the distance, its shimmering edges pulsing with an energy that had once felt like salvation. Now it felt like a wound that could never heal. The woman with silver hair, the one who had welcomed her, stood a few feet away, watching Elena closely with eyes that seemed to know everything. The woman's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with the turmoil within Elena, but Elena couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was amiss. The peace of this world was too perfect, too pristine to be real. "I don't understand," Elena said, her voice trembling as she clutched the gemstone tighter. "What do you mean by balance has been disturbed?" The silver-haired woman's expression softened, but there was a flicker of something darker in her eyes. "The gemstone you hold is not merely a key to this world, it is a bridge. A bridge that connects the two realms. And for centuries, it has kept the balance between them. But something has changed. The forces of your world have begun to unravel, and with them, the very fabric of reality. The rift has grown weaker, and the energies of your world and ours are beginning to collide." Elena's stomach tightened. The thought of her world collapsing was too much to bear. The wars, the suffering, she thought. Was it because of the rift? Was this my fault? Why me? Elena whispered, almost to herself. Why was I chosen to hold the key? The woman stepped closer, her movements slow and deliberate, like someone speaking to a child. Because you are the one who can restore the balance. The gemstone recognizes the soul capable of making the right choice. The power it holds is not to be used lightly. It can save your world, but it can also destroy it. Elena felt the weight of the words settle into her chest like a leaden ball. Save her world? How could she? She barely understood what was happening, let alone how to fix it. But the weight of the gemstone in her hand was a constant reminder that it was no ordinary object. She could feel its power pulsing beneath her fingers, the ancient energy contained within it, waiting for her to make a decision. The silver-haired woman continued, her tone darkening. If you keep the key, if you use its power, you can stop the wars. You can heal the suffering. This world, she gestured to the peaceful land around them, will become a sanctuary untouched by time and conflict. But you must understand, Elena, once you use it, the consequences will be irreversible. Your world will change forever. And you will never be able to return. Elena's mind spun with the implications of those words. She had already seen what her world could become, but was she ready to condemn everything she knew? Her family, her friends, the life she had built, all of it would be left behind if she chose this new world. And yet, the idea of a peaceful, untouched place, a world free of war, suffering, and despair, was so tempting, so seductive. It was everything she had dreamed of. But what about them? Elena asked, her voice breaking as she looked over her shoulder at the rift, the faint glow of the ocean world still visible behind her. What about Lucas? Jonas? Clara? They're still down there. I can't just. The woman's eyes softened, but there was no pity in them, only a cold, knowing acceptance. You cannot save everyone, Elena. Not all of them will be able to follow you. Some are destined to remain behind. But you are the key. It is your choice whether to abandon them or take the world's fate into your hands. The words felt like a slap. Elena's chest tightened, and for a moment she could hear Lucas's voice in her mind calling to her, desperate. The others had been her companions on this journey. They had fought together to uncover the truth, to discover the secrets of the ancient temple and the gemstone. She couldn't abandon them, could she? The woman took another step forward, her expression unreadable. The key has been entrusted to you, Elena, because you are the one who will make the ultimate choice. The others, your friends, they are not the ones who can decide this. It is your fate and yours alone. Elena clenched her jaw, the gemstone in her hand trembling as she fought to make sense of it all. The pressure was unbearable, her thoughts racing. Can I leave them behind? Can I give up everything I know for a world that promises peace but is full of uncertainty? She glanced back at the rift, the faintest glimmer of the ocean world still visible, dark and foreboding. The shadows that had chased them, the creatures that lurked in its depths, they were still out there waiting for them. Waiting for her. She could feel it in her bones. The choice was not just between two worlds, it was a choice between salvation and damnation. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, steadying her breath. I've come this far. I can't just turn back now. But then a thought pierced through the fog of her mind, a thought that made her skin crawl. What if this world isn't what it seems? What if they've been waiting for me to open the rift for a reason I don't understand? The woman's voice interrupted her thoughts, smooth and insistent. The time to decide is now, Elena. Choose. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze, the world, the whispers, the pull of the rift. The key hummed in her hand, louder now, the air around her crackling with tension. Elena's heart pounded in her chest, and for a fleeting second she could see everything, both worlds side by side. Her world struggling, dying. This world peaceful, serene. The lives of her friends, the sacrifices they had made, and the unknown future that awaited them all. But deep down Elena knew the truth. The decision wasn't just about saving her world, it was about saving herself. About finding peace not just for the world but for her soul. Could she live with herself if she made the wrong choice? Could she bear the weight of a future she couldn't even fathom? With a final, shaking breath, she made her decision. Elena's heart raced as the world seemed to blur around her. The weight of the gemstone in her hand felt impossibly heavy, the air thick with the tension of her decision. Everything had led to this moment, the culmination of their journey, and the choice before her felt like the crushing weight of eternity. She stepped toward the rift. Her mind swirled with 1,000 thoughts. Thoughts of her family, her friends, the lives she had known. Could I live in a world without them? Could I abandon everything I've ever known for a place of peace that might not even be real? The question echoed in her mind, louder with each passing second, louder than the whispers of the silver-haired woman beside her. But she couldn't turn back. The fate of 2 worlds now rested in her hands. Behind her, the woman's eyes were filled with both pity and understanding. Once you cross, there will be no turning back, Elena, she said softly, as though she were speaking to someone who had already made their decision. The path you take is yours alone. Whatever happens next, you will bear the weight of it. Elena nodded, barely hearing her words. Her gaze shifted one last time to the ocean world through the rift, the dark abyss that had once been her reality. She could still feel the terror and loss that had haunted her throughout their journey, the sound of the creatures that lurked beneath, the faces of her friends calling out to her. But now, those voices seemed distant, fading into the background of her mind, replaced by something deeper, something more primal. The need for peace, for resolution. The light on the other side of the rift flickered, and in that moment, Elena understood. It wasn't just the promise of peace or the allure of a world without suffering. It was the understanding that the world she had come from was too broken, too consumed by chaos, to be saved by the actions of just one person. The choice was never about saving the world. It was about saving herself from the constant cycle of pain and loss, and in doing so choosing to leave behind the past and embrace the unknown. With a final, steadying breath, Elena stepped forward, crossing the threshold. The moment she passed through the rift, she was not greeted by the overwhelming silence of peace she had expected. Instead, there was a rush of sound, laughter, voices, the hum of life, but not the life she had imagined. It was not the serene world of perfection that she had hoped for, but something different. The air here was not the soft breeze of a paradise. It was alive with the buzz of activity, of people moving, working, existing. The fields she had seen from the other side of the rift now lay before her, but they were no longer golden and untouched. Instead, they were fields of growing crops, tended by people dressed in simple but worn clothes, moving in a harmony that spoke of years of hard labor and effort. The world was beautiful, but it was also real. It was not an escape, not a utopia, but a world that had its own struggles, its own imperfections. Elena stood in the middle of it all, the gemstone still glowing softly in her hand, its power no longer overwhelming but gentle, like the pulse of a heartbeat. It was not the key to a perfect world but a key to something else, a place where people could rebuild, work together, and find peace not by escaping their struggles but by confronting them. She was not the savior of this world. She was simply a part of it now. Elena's gaze lifted, and she saw the figures from earlier, the ones who had appeared so serene, now working alongside the people of this world. The silver-haired woman was there too, but she was no longer the figure of authority that had guided Elena. Now she was simply another person, a part of the community, working the land, her eyes reflecting a quiet wisdom. "Welcome home," the woman said, her voice no longer distant or cold but warm and familiar. "This is where we all belong." Elena didn't speak. She didn't need to. She understood now. Time passed. Days blended into weeks and weeks into months. Elena found herself working alongside the people of this new world, helping cultivate the land, teaching the younger generation about the importance of balance, between work and rest, between dreams and reality. The gemstone was no longer just a relic of the past. It had become a symbol of the choice they had all made, to build a future not on perfection but on unity. The world she had left behind still haunted her dreams, a distant echo of all that had been lost. But in this new world, Elena had learned to live without the constant weight of fear, to find purpose in the struggle, and to accept the imperfections that came with it. She had made her choice, and it was one she would never regret. In the end, the world she had entered was not a paradise. It was a world that, like all others, had its challenges, its heartaches, and its triumphs. But it was a world that had found balance, a balance that the old world had lost long ago. And as the sun set over the horizon, casting long shadows over the fields, Elena realized that peace was not something that could be handed to you, it was something that had to be earned by everyone together. This story is not true. It is a work of fiction, born from the minds of those who dare to dream of what could be, and what could never be.